Hello, grade 8s, and welcome to another algebra lesson. So we're going to step away from solving equations for a lesson here, and I'm going to talk about an algebra technique called the distributive property. Okay? Now, you should recognize the word distribute here, okay? And this is allowing us to distribute a multiplication, okay? So it's often talked about expanding brackets, okay? And we expand brackets by multiplying. So really what we're doing is we're removing brackets by multiplying, okay? So that is really what we're doing here. Is we're trying to simplify an algebra statement by getting rid of brackets. So what will happen is there will be a number in front of the bracket, and we're going to multiply that number in front of the bracket by each term inside the bracket. So if there's two things inside the bracket, two terms, the number in front multiplies both of those two terms. If there's three terms inside the bracket, the number in front multiplies all three terms inside the bracket. Now, once you've done that, you need to look to see if you can gather or add any like terms. Okay? There won't always be like terms, but we always check to see, aren't there any like terms to add together? Okay? And we practiced that skill already. Okay, so let's start with something really simple. Right? So 2 is sitting in front of a bracket. That means to multiply. So the 2 is going to multiply the 6, and you all know that 2 times 6 is 12. That was easy. Now what happens if I take the 6 and I break it up? So now I have 4 plus 2. 4 plus 2 does equal 6, but I'm breaking it up into two parts. So now this is how the distributive property works. The 2 will multiply the 4, and the 2 will also multiply the 2. It will multiply each part inside the brackets. So what do we get when we go 2 times 4? Well, I'm hoping you recognize that that equals 8. And now the next term needs to be connected with an add or a subtract, and it depends on the sign. Now this has an invisible positive sign in front of it. So on the second part here, we're taking a positive and we're multiplying it by a positive because the sign in front belongs to that term. So positive 2 times positive 2 gives us positive 4. So the sign tells us the connector. So that's a plus. If it's a positive, it's a plus. If it's a negative, it's going to be a minus. Okay? So now, let's add these like terms together. There's numbers that can get added to other numbers. What is 8 plus 4? Well, that's 12. It should equal 12 because, look, that one was 12. So I'm just showing you that the distributive property actually gets you to the right answer. And some of you might have said, well, why didn't you just solve what's in the brackets first by adding it together? And yeah, you could have, and you would have got that, and you would have got that, finally, 12. But I'm showing you that this works because there are cases where we can't add together what's in the bracket. If we look at the second example, this is an X group, and this is a number group. We can't add them together, but they're still in a bracket and they're being multiplied by 2, just like up here. So that means that the 2 has to multiply the 4x first. So you just multiply the numbers in front. So 2 times 4 gives you 8, and then we have this x, so it's 8 x's. And then the 2 in front of the bracket multiplies the next term. So remember, positive 2 times positive 2 gives us a positive, and 2 times 2 gives you 4. So now our answer is 8x plus 4. We can't add together x's and 4's, right? They're different terms. So this, in fact, is our final answer. Okay? Let's look at one that's a little bit bigger. Now, to make it a little bit more complicated, I've put a -2 in front, so we need to be paying attention to the signs. So multiply the first term in the bracket. So a negative times an invisible positive, a negative times a positive gives us a negative. 2 times 2 gives you 4, and there's an x there, so it's times that x also. Now move on to the second term. A negative times a negative gives us a positive. 2 times 3 is 6, and there's a y there that's multiplied, so we'll just put the y down. Keep going. Multiply the third term. So now a negative times a positive is a negative, and 2 times 6 is 12. So we've expanded and removed the brackets by multiplying. Now again, we can't add x groups to y groups to number groups, so this is our final answer. Okay? Let's move on to a fifth example. So now, there's a 2 in front of a bracket. There's 2 parts inside the bracket, but then there's something else being added on at the end. The 2 only multiplies the 2 parts in the bracket. It does not multiply the 4x. So we get rid of the bracket first by multiplying. So 2 times 3 is 6, times the x gives us 6x. Move to the next term. Invisible positive times a negative gives us a negative, and 2 times 4 gives you 8. Now, it does not move on to multiply, so we're just going to tag this part on, so it's going to be plus 4x at the end. So this question is going to be out of 2 marks. You get 1 mark for removing the bracket. Now you should recognize that there are some like terms. So we're going to put our variables first. So whoops, that's an invisible positive, so positive 6 is going to be added to positive 4. So hot added to hot gets hotter, so this gives us positive 10 x's. You don't have to put the plus sign at the front, but you certainly can. So those 2 parts gave us positive 10x. Now, numbers go with any other number, but there isn't any other numbers to go with that, so we're just going to tag that on as subtract 8. You get a second mark after you've added your like terms together. Okay? Let's look at another example. This one's a little bit tougher because we have 2 brackets to remove. So the 3 is going to multiply the 2 parts inside. So 3 times 2 is 6, times the x gives us 6x. Go to the next one. Invisible positive times a negative gives us a negative. And 3 times 2 gives us 6. Now let's move to the second bracket to expand. Remember, the sign in front belongs to the 5, so that's like positive 5 multiplying our x. So this has an invisible 1 in front, so 5 times that 1 gives us 5, and that's going to be a positive because it's a positive times a positive, and then times x, so positive 5x. Multiply the next part. A positive times a positive gives us a positive, and 5 times 3 gives us 15. So 1 mark for removing the brackets by multiplying. A second part by adding any like terms together. So put your variable terms first. So x's go with other x's. Again, this is an invisible positive, so hot added to more hot gets hotter, so that's 11 x's. Cross them off. And then now we have negative 6 added to positive 15. So 6 of those cold are going to cancel 6 of those hots. And what are you going to be left with? You're going to be left with 9 hots. So that means plus 9. Okay? Negative 6 and positive 15 give us positive 9. All right, that would be a second mark. Now I want to do one more because you see 2 brackets. The first one is easy. The second one is a little bit tricky. So multiply. 5 times 2 is 10, times x gives us 10x. Go to the next term. A positive times a negative is a negative, and 5 times 4 is 20. Now, we have a bracket, but there's no number in front of the bracket. So you have to think, well, there's in fact an invisible 1 sitting there. So now, when you multiply, remember the sign belongs to that. So a negative times a positive is going to give us a negative. And 1 times invisible 1 again gives us 1x, or you could just write x. Move on to the next part. And a negative times a positive is a negative, and 1 times 7 is 7. So what happens when you have a negative in front of the bracket? All it does is change the sign. So this was a positive x, it becomes a negative x. This was a positive 7, it became a negative 7. All right, you get 1 mark for expanding your bracket. Now you need to add like terms together. Okay, so x is first. So positive 10 and negative 1, that's going to give us positive 9x's. Negative 20 and negative 7, cold added to more cold gets colder, so negative 27. Okay, or subtract 27. There's our final answer. That gives us a 2nd mark. All right, take care. See you soon.